The lawyer's voice carried across the marble foyer like a death sentence. To Isabel Landry, I leave $5. $1 for each child and $2 for herself. Andrea Landry's cruel laughter echoed through the marble mansion as Isabel clutched a $5 bill, her hands trembling with humiliation, a grieving black mother facing the most devastating moment of her life and then being mocked by her in-laws who just stripped away everything she thought her husband had left her. But none of them knew about the envelope sitting in a lawyer's office across town, an envelope that would destroy them all by morning. If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video, and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue.
The November wind bit through Isabel Landry's black coat as she knelt beside the fresh granite headstone in Riverside Memorial Cemetery in Columbus, Ohio. 3 small figures huddled close to her: Bryce, Mila, and Karina, all 7 years old, their matching red scarves bright against the gray afternoon sky. "Daddy, we learned fractions today," Mila whispered to the stone, her breath forming small clouds. "1/3 of our family is gone now." Isabel's heart clenched. Even in grief, her daughter spoke in mathematical terms, just like Tyson had taught them. She traced his name with trembling fingers. Tyson Andrew Landry, beloved husband and father, 1985 to 2024. "Tell him about the soccer game, Bryce." Karina nudged her brother. Bryce stepped forward, his voice small. "We won 3-2, Dad. The coach says, I have your left foot." He paused. "When are you coming home?" Isabel pulled all 3 children closer, feeling their confusion pierce her soul. How do you explain forever to 7-year-olds? How do you tell them that the man who sang them to sleep every night, who made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs every Sunday, who called them his 3 little miracles, would never walk through their door again? "Mom's crying again," Karina observed matter-of-factly, reaching up to wipe Isabel's cheek with her small mitten. "I'm okay, baby." Isabel forced a smile. "I just miss him too." The December afternoon was fading, casting long shadows across the cemetery. Other families had come and gone, leaving flowers and memories. But Isabel couldn't bring herself to leave. Here, surrounded by Tyson's presence, she could almost hear his laugh, feel his arms around her shoulders. 3 months. It had been 3 months since the accident. 3 months since that drunk driver ran the red light on High Street and changed everything. 3 months of sleepless nights, unpaid bills piling up, and her children asking questions she couldn't answer. "Remember when Daddy proposed right here?" Isabel asked softly, pointing to the old oak tree 20 yards away. "He said this place was special because it was peaceful, eternal." "And you said yes because he had the ring in a Happy Meal box," Mila giggled, the first genuine smile Isabel had seen from her in weeks. "He was nervous," Isabel laughed through her tears. "Your father, this confident man who could negotiate $1-million deals, was shaking like a leaf asking me to marry him." "Tell us the part about the rain," Bryce urged, settling cross-legged on the grass despite the cold. Isabel's voice grew warm with memory. "It started pouring right after I said yes. We ran for his car, but he stopped in the middle of the parking lot, picked me up, and spun me around in the rain. He said he wanted to remember every detail of the happiest moment of his life." "Even getting soaked?" Karina asked. "Especially getting soaked." Isabel smoothed Karina's dark curls, so much like her father's. "He said real love isn't afraid of storms." The children had heard this story dozens of times, but it comforted them. It reminded them that before the sadness, before the bills and the uncertainty, there had been joy. Pure, unconditional joy. Isabel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Mrs. Landry? This is Felix Liu from Whitmore Associates. I'm calling regarding your late husband's estate." Isabel's stomach dropped. She'd been dreading this call. Yes. The family has requested a formal reading of the will tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the family estate in Westerville. Your presence is required. The formal tone chilled her more than the November air. Not invited. Required. I'll be there, she managed. Good. The address is 847 Manor Ridge Drive. Don't be late. The line went dead. Isabel stared at the phone, her hands shaking. She'd been to the Landry family estate exactly 3 times in 6 years of marriage. Once for their engagement announcement, once for their wedding reception, and once for Tyson's funeral. Each time, the reception had been ice cold. Who was that, Mommy? Mila asked, noticing her mother's sudden pallor. Just some business about Daddy's things. Isabel stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. We should go home. It's getting dark. As they walked toward her aging Honda Civic, Bryce tugged her sleeve. Mom, are we going to be okay? Without Dad? The question she'd been dreading. Isabel knelt to his level, looking into eyes that mirrored Tyson's warm brown gaze. We're going to be fine, sweetheart. We have each other, and that's everything we need. But as she buckled the children into their car seats and drove through the Columbus suburbs toward their small rental house on Maple Street, doubt gnawed at her. The life insurance payout had covered the funeral and a few months of expenses, but money was running out fast. Her part-time job at the community center barely covered groceries, let alone rent, utilities, and everything 3 growing children needed. Tyson had always handled the finances. Don't worry about money, love, he'd always said. I've got us covered. But he'd never explained exactly how, and now she was learning the hard way that hope doesn't pay bills. Their house sat in a row of modest 2-story homes, each with a small front yard and dreams bigger than their mortgages. Isabel had painted the front door bright blue when they moved in 2 years ago. Like the sky on our wedding day, Tyson had said, kissing her forehead as she finished the last stroke. Now that blue door felt like a mockery. How many more months could she afford this place? How could she uproot the children from the only stable home they'd known? Can we have mac and cheese for dinner? Karina asked as they climbed the front steps. With the good cheese? Bryce added hopefully. Isabel's heart ached. The good cheese cost $3 more than the regular kind. $3 that felt like 30 when you were counting every penny. Of course, she said, unlocking the door. Go wash your hands. As the children thundered upstairs, Isabel stood in her small kitchen, staring at the bills scattered across the counter. Electric, past due. Water, final notice. Rent, due in 5 days. Her bank account, $247.83. She sank into a kitchen chair, finally allowing herself to cry without little eyes watching. The grief was overwhelming, but the fear was worse. Grief was love with nowhere to go. Fear was the knowledge that love alone couldn't keep the lights on or put food on the table. Her phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read, Mom. Hey, sweetie. Her mother's voice was warm but concerned. How are you holding up? We visited the cemetery today. The kids are doing better, I think. And you? Isabel closed her eyes. I'm scared, Mom. The lawyer called about Tyson's will. I have to go to his family's house tomorrow. Her mother's silence spoke volumes. Everyone knew about the Landry family's attitude toward Isabel. They'd made no secret of their disapproval when Tyson brought home a black woman, made no effort to include her in family gatherings, barely acknowledged their grandchildren's existence. Do you want me to come with you? Her mother offered. No, it's okay. It's just a formality, right? Reading the will, signing papers. I'll be home before the kids get out of school. Isabel, honey, I need to tell you something. Her mother's tone shifted. I've been talking to your father about your situation. We want to help, but you're on a fixed income. I know, Mom. I'm not asking for money. We could take the kids for a while. Until you get back on your feet. Isabel's chest tightened. The offer was generous, loving, and completely impossible. "Mom, they just lost their father. I can't send them away. I'm just saying the option is there. We love those babies." After they hung up, Isabel sat in the gathering darkness of her kitchen, listening to her children's laughter drifting down from upstairs. They were playing some elaborate game involving superhero action figures and what sounded like a small army of stuffed animals. How had Tyson made it look so easy? He'd juggled a demanding career, family time, and financial responsibilities without ever seeming stressed. He'd wake up early to make breakfast, help with homework after dinner, read bedtime stories in different voices for each character. "Dad's good at everything," Bryce had said once. "He's like a real-life superhero." And now she was supposed to be both parents, to fill a void that felt impossibly large. Isabel's laptop sat open on the counter, job search websites bookmarked but barely touched. Every decent-paying position required skills she didn't have or hours that would leave her children with babysitters more than their mother. The community center job was flexible and understanding, but it paid barely above minimum wage. Upstairs, water ran in the bathroom. Bath time. Another routine to navigate alone. "Mom!" Mila called. "Karina's trying to wash her hair with body soap again." "I'll be right there," Isabel called back, wiping her eyes and forcing strength into her voice. As she climbed the stairs toward the chaos of bath time, bedtime stories, and the 100 small moments that made up their evening routine, one thought echoed in her mind. Tomorrow's meeting with the Landry family could change everything. Maybe Tyson had left them something, some small inheritance that could buy her time to figure out their future. She had no idea that tomorrow would shatter every assumption she'd ever made about her husband's family, her marriage, and her own strength. But tonight, there were children to bathe, stories to read, and the pretense of normal life to maintain. Tomorrow's storm could wait. The morning of the will reading arrived gray and bitter, matching Isabel's mood as she stood before her bedroom mirror. She'd barely slept, tossing between anxiety about the meeting and worry about leaving the children with Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor. Isabel smoothed her black dress, the same one she'd worn to Tyson's funeral 3 months ago. It was her only formal outfit, purchased on clearance 2 years earlier for a community center fundraiser. The fabric was simple polyester, but it was clean and respectful. She hoped it would be enough for whatever waited at the Landry estate. "You look pretty, Mommy," Karina said from the doorway, still in her pajamas covered with cartoon unicorns. "Thank you, baby." Isabel knelt and kissed her daughter's forehead. "Remember, Mrs. Patterson will pick you up from school today. I'll be home by dinner. Will you bring us something from Grandma and Grandpa Landry's house?" Bryce asked, appearing with Mila beside him. Isabel's stomach twisted. The children had only met their paternal grandparents a handful of times, but they still hoped for some connection, some acknowledgement that they were family. "We'll see, sweetheart. Now go get ready for school." The drive to Westerville took 40 minutes through Columbus traffic. Isabel gripped the steering wheel of her Honda Civic, its engine making concerning noises that she couldn't afford to investigate. She passed strip malls and suburban developments before turning into the exclusive Tartan Fields neighborhood where house prices started at 7 figures. 847 Manor Ridge Drive sat behind imposing iron gates at the end of a circular drive. The Georgian colonial mansion sprawled across manicured grounds, its red brick facade and white columns speaking of old money and older prejudices. Isabel had forgotten how intimidating the place was, how small it made her feel. She parked beside a row of luxury vehicles. A silver Mercedes, a black BMW, a gleaming Lexus. Her dented Honda looked like a charity case among them. Laura Frank, the family housekeeper, answered the door. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral, but Isabel caught a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "Mrs. Landry," Laura said quietly. "They're waiting in the library." Isabel followed Laura through the marble foyer, past oil paintings of stern-faced Landry ancestors who seemed to judge her with their painted eyes. The library door stood open, revealing a room that could have housed her entire apartment. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, leather-bound volumes that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The family had arranged themselves like a tribunal. Valentine Landry sat behind an enormous mahogany desk, his silver hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes cold as winter ice. Andrea Landry perched in a wingback chair to his right, her platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, her red lipstick sharp as a blade. Both wore black suits that probably cost more than Isabel made in 3 months. 2 other relatives occupied chairs along the wall. Isabel recognized them from the funeral but couldn't remember their names. They watched her with the same hostile curiosity as spectators at a gladiator fight. Felix Liu, the family lawyer, stood near a wall of law books, a briefcase open on a side table. He was a thin man in his 50s with nervous hands and eyes that avoided direct contact. Isabel, Valentine's voice carried the tone of a man addressing an unwelcome pest. Please, sit. He gestured to a single chair positioned in the center of the room, isolated from the family circle. Isabel realized with growing dread that this arrangement was deliberate. She wasn't family to them. She was an outsider being judged. Thank you for coming, Andrea said, though her tone suggested anything but gratitude. Her gaze traveled over Isabel's dress with obvious disdain. I see you're still wearing discount clothing to important occasions. Heat flashed through Isabel's cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. I came to hear about Tyson's will. Yes, well. Valentine leaned back in his chair. This is rather awkward, but Tyson's final wishes were quite specific. Felix cleared his throat nervously and opened a leather portfolio. Shall we proceed with the reading? By all means, Andrea said, her lips curving into something that wasn't quite a smile. Felix began reading in a monotone voice, covering legal language about probate and estate administration. Isabel tried to follow along, but the formal terminology washed over her like a foreign language. She caught references to various investments, property holdings, and trust funds, but none of it seemed to concern her. Then Felix reached the section that made her blood run cold. To my beloved wife, Isabel Landry, and our children Bryce, Mila, and Karina, I leave the sum of $5 total. The words hit Isabel like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs, felt her world tilt sideways. $5. For her and the children. Combined. I'm sorry, she whispered, certain she'd misheard. Could you repeat that? Felix glanced nervously at Valentine before reading again. To Isabel Landry, I leave $5. Andrea Landry's voice cut through the stunned silence like a knife. $1 for each child, and $2 for herself. The gasps came from the relatives along the wall, theatrical sounds of mock surprise and poorly concealed amusement. But it was the snickers that followed that destroyed Isabel completely. Quiet, cruel laughter that told her this humiliation was exactly what they'd hoped for. $5. One of the relatives whispered loudly enough for Isabel to hear. I spend more than that on coffee. Well, Andrea continued, examining her manicured nails, I suppose it's fitting. After all, what did she really contribute to this family? Isabel's hands shook in her lap. This couldn't be real. Tyson had loved her, loved their children. He would never have left them with nothing while his family inherited everything. Would he? I don't understand, Isabel said, her voice barely audible. Tyson always said we were provided for. He said there was life insurance, savings. Valentine's laugh was harsh. Life insurance, yes. A modest policy that barely covered the funeral expenses. As for savings, he shrugged. My son lived beyond his means, trying to maintain the illusion that he could afford his lifestyle choices. The phrase, lifestyle choices, hung in the air like poison. Isabel understood the implication. She was the lifestyle choice. The black wife who had somehow trapped their precious son. The majority of Tyson's estate returns to the family trust, Felix continued reading, including the residence at 1247 Elm Grove Avenue, all investment accounts, and personal property. Isabel's heart stopped. 1247 Elm Grove Avenue. That was their house. The blue door, the kitchen where Tyson had taught the children to make pancakes, the backyard where he'd pushed them on swings until sunset. The only home her children had ever known. "That's our house," she said, standing abruptly. "We live there. The children's rooms, their toys, everything." "Actually," Andrea's voice dripped false sympathy, "that's the Landry family house. Always has been. Tyson was merely living there with our permission. But the mortgage payments, the property taxes, we've been." Isabel stopped. They hadn't been making mortgage payments. Tyson had always handled that directly. She'd never seen a mortgage statement, never questioned how they could afford such a nice house on his salary. The truth crashed over her like ice water. The house wasn't theirs. It had never been theirs. They'd been living in Landry family property, probably rent-free as some kind of allowance to their son. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises," Valentine said matter-of-factly. "Though we're willing to extend that to 45 days, given the children's school situation." 45 days. Isabel's mind raced through the impossibility of her situation. 45 days to find a new home with no money, no savings, no anything. $5 wouldn't even cover a single night in a motel. Where are we supposed to go? The question escaped before she could stop it, and she hated how desperate she sounded. "I'm sure you'll figure something out," Andrea said, studying her engagement ring. "Perhaps your own family can help. I believe that's how these situations typically resolve themselves." The barely concealed racism in her tone was unmistakable. "These situations. Your own family." The message was clear. You're not our responsibility now that our son is gone. Isabel felt tears threatening, but she refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her break down completely. She'd already shown too much vulnerability. "I need to see the will myself," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Felix glanced at Valentine, who nodded curtly. The lawyer handed her several pages of legal documents. Isabel scanned them frantically, looking for some mistake, some clause that would make sense of this nightmare. But there it was, in black and white. Tyson's signature at the bottom, dated just 6 months before his death. Her name appeared exactly once. To Isabel Landry, the sum of $5, $5. "This has to be wrong," she whispered. "Tyson wouldn't. He loved us. He loved his children." "Love," Andrea said, standing and smoothing her skirt, "doesn't always translate into financial responsibility. Perhaps if you'd encouraged him to be more practical instead of living in fantasy land." "That's enough," Isabel said, standing as well. "Don't you dare question my husband's love for his family." "Your husband?" Andrea's eyebrows rose. "Oh, my dear, you really don't understand, do you? Tyson may have gone through the motions of marriage, but this family's legacy, our real legacy, doesn't include." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Isabel looked around the room at these people who shared her children's DNA, who should have been family, who should have cared about 3 grieving 7-year-olds. Instead, she saw cold strangers who viewed her children as embarrassments to be discarded. "I should go," Isabel said quietly. "I need to figure out how to tell my children they're losing their home." "Before you leave," Valentine said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a crisp $5 bill and placed it on the desk. "Your inheritance." The gesture was so cruel, so deliberately humiliating, that several family members actually chuckled. Isabel stared at the money, this pathetic sum that was supposed to represent her husband's love, her children's security, their entire future. She walked to the desk and picked up the $5 bill, folding it carefully and placing it in her purse. Someday, she promised herself, she would remember this moment. She would remember their faces, their laughter, their casual cruelty. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for showing me exactly who you are." Isabel walked toward the door with as much dignity as she could gather. Behind her, she heard Andrea's voice. pitched just loud enough to carry. Well, that's that unfortunate chapter closed. Now we can get back to more pressing family business. The library door closed behind Isabel with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything she'd thought she knew about her life. Laura Frank waited in the hallway, her kind eyes full of sympathy. "Mrs. Landry, I'm so sorry. If there's anything I can do—" "Thank you," Isabel managed. "But I think you've done enough by being kind. That means more than you know." As Isabel walked through the marble foyer toward the front door, she caught sight of herself in an ornate mirror. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had just lost everything twice. First her husband, now her entire future. Outside, November wind whipped across the manicured grounds. Isabel sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the mansion that held such wealth, such privilege, such deliberate heartlessness. Her phone showed 3 missed calls from Mrs. Patterson and a text. Children asking when mommy comes home. Hope all went well. How do you tell 3 7-year-olds that the only home they've ever known is being taken away? How do you explain that their father's family sees them as mistakes to be erased? Isabel started her car and pulled away from 847 Manor Ridge Drive, carrying with her a $5 bill and the devastating knowledge that she was completely, utterly alone. What she didn't know was that 20 miles away, in a modest law office in downtown Columbus, another lawyer was reading a very different document. And tomorrow would bring revelations that would turn this day of devastating loss into the beginning of something extraordinary. The drive home from the Landry estate passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. Isabel pulled into the driveway of 1247 Elm Grove Avenue and sat staring at the house she'd called home for 2 years. The blue front door that Tyson had loved now felt like a lie, every memory tainted by the knowledge that none of it had ever truly been theirs. Her hands shook as she turned off the engine. The $5 bill sat in her purse like evidence of her own stupidity. How had she been so blind? How had she never questioned the lack of mortgage payments, never wondered why Tyson handled all the financial details alone? "Because you trusted him," she whispered to herself. "Because that's what marriage is supposed to be." But now that trust felt naive, dangerous. Had Tyson known what his family would do? Had he planned this abandonment, or had he simply been too weak to stand up to his parents? The questions circled in her mind like vultures, picking apart every happy memory. Isabel forced herself to get out of the car and unlock the front door. The house felt different now, like she was trespassing in someone else's life. The family photos on the mantel seemed to mock her. There was Tyson pushing the children on swings in the backyard. There they were at Christmas morning, surrounded by gifts he'd somehow afforded. There was their wedding day, her in a simple white dress from a discount store, him in his father's borrowed tuxedo, both of them glowing with happiness. Had any of it been real? Her phone rang. Mrs. Patterson. "Hello, dear. How did the meeting go?" Isabel closed her eyes, gathering strength she didn't feel. "It was complicated. Are the children okay?" "They're fine, sweetheart. Playing in my garden, helping me plant winter bulbs." "But Isabel, you sound upset. What happened?" The kindness in the older woman's voice nearly broke Isabel's composure. Mrs. Patterson had been their neighbor since they moved in, had babysat countless times, had brought casseroles after Tyson's funeral. She was more family than the Landrys had ever been. "I'll pick them up in an hour," Isabel managed. "I just need some time to think." "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need." After hanging up, Isabel sank onto the living room couch, the same couch where Tyson used to read bedtime stories, where they'd planned their future together. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Isabel, you're back early. How did it go?" "Mom." The word came out as a sob. "They gave me $5. $5 for me and the children combined." Silence on the other end. Then quietly, "What?" Isabel told her everything. The humiliation, the racism, the house, the eviction notice. By the end, both women were crying. "You come home right now," her mother said fiercely. Pack the children and come to Atlanta. We'll figure this out together. I can't uproot them again. They've lost their father. Now they're losing their home. I can't take away their friends, their school, everything familiar. Then what are you going to do? You can't pay rent anywhere on what you make at the community center. Isabel stared around the living room, at the children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator, at the growth chart marked on the kitchen doorframe. I don't know. Meanwhile, across town in a small law office on 3rd Street, Gage Olson sat at his desk staring at a sealed envelope marked Isabel Landry, TOB opened December 15, 2024. Today was December 14th. One more day. Gage ran his hands through his dark hair, a habit from law school that intensified when he was stressed. At 32, he'd built a reputation as Columbus's most ethical attorney, the lawyer other lawyers called when they needed someone they could trust absolutely. That reputation was both his greatest asset and his current torment. Tyson Landry had come to him 6 months before his death, asking for complete confidentiality and a very unusual arrangement. He'd wanted to create a second will, one that would only be revealed if certain conditions were met. Specifically, if his family attempted to disinherit his wife and children. My family will try to destroy them, Tyson had said, his voice heavy with certainty. They've never accepted Isabel, never acknowledged that my children are their grandchildren. If something happens to me, they'll find a way to leave them with nothing. Why don't you just change your primary will? Gage had asked. Because they'll contest it. They have resources I don't, lawyers I can't afford to fight. But if I let them think they've won first. Tyson's smile had been grim. Well, then the real will becomes a surprise they can't prepare for. Gage had thought the plan overly dramatic at the time. Surely no family would abandon 3 innocent children, would leave a grieving widow destitute. But Tyson had insisted, and the fee he'd paid had been substantial enough to fund Gage's pro bono work for 6 months. Now, watching the local news coverage of Tyson Landry's estate proceedings, Gage realized his client had been absolutely right. The brief segment mentioned the family's disappointment with their son's financial irresponsibility and their intention to consolidate family assets appropriately. No mention of a widow or 3 children. The real will in Gage's safe told a very different story. Tyson Landry hadn't been financially irresponsible. He'd been incredibly careful, methodical, and secretive. Hidden accounts, offshore investments, real estate holdings his family knew nothing about. The man had been building an empire while letting everyone think he was barely scraping by. But attorney-client privilege bound Gage absolutely. He couldn't act until December 15th, couldn't even contact Isabel Landry to hint that help was coming. All he could do was wait and hope she could survive one more day of believing herself abandoned. His phone rang. Randy Hendricks, his law partner. Gage, you look like hell. You've been staring at that envelope for 3 hours. Legal ethics, Gage said simply. Sometimes doing the right thing means watching someone suffer when you could help them. The Landry case? Gage nodded. Randy was the only person who knew about the second will, bound by the same professional obligations. 24 more hours, Randy said gently. Then you can change that woman's life. If she doesn't break first. Do you know what it's like to lose everything twice in 3 months? First her husband, now her security, her home, her children's future. Gage had seen the news footage of Isabel Landry at her husband's funeral. She'd held those 3 children close while tears streamed down her face, but her posture had been straight, dignified. She'd looked like someone determined to survive whatever came next. He hoped that strength would last one more day. Back on Elm Grove Avenue, Isabel sat at her kitchen table surrounded by bills and bank statements, trying to perform financial miracles with a calculator and sheer desperation. The numbers didn't lie. Even if she found a full-time job tomorrow, even if she worked 2 jobs, she couldn't afford rent anywhere decent enough for the children. The community center job paid $12 an hour for 25 hours a week. That was $300 weekly, $1,200 monthly before taxes. After taxes, maybe $1,000. The cheapest decent apartment she'd found online started at $900 a month, and that didn't include utilities, food, clothing, school supplies, or the 1,000 other expenses 3 children required. She pulled up rental listings on her laptop, scrolling through options that felt increasingly hopeless. Studios in dangerous neighborhoods. Shared housing situations that wouldn't accept children. Places so far from the children's school that she'd spend her entire paycheck on gas. A knock at the front door interrupted her despair. Through the window, she saw Mrs. Patterson with the children, all 4 of them carrying small potted plants. "Mommy!" Karina burst through the door first, holding a tiny chrysanthemum. "We planted flowers for Daddy's grave." "Mrs. Patterson let us each pick one," Bryce added, his voice excited. "Mine's yellow like his favorite shirt." Isabel knelt and gathered all 3 children into a fierce hug, breathing in their innocent joy. They didn't know yet. They still believed in security, in permanence, in the idea that homes lasted forever. "They were angels," Mrs. Patterson said softly, studying Isabel's face with concern. "But you look terrible, dear. What happened at that meeting?" Isabel glanced at the children, who were arranging their plants on the windowsill. "Kids, go wash your hands and start your homework. I need to talk to Mrs. Patterson." When they were out of earshot, Isabel explained everything again. Mrs. Patterson's expression grew darker with each detail. "Those monsters," she said finally. "Treating you like that, treating those babies like they don't matter. It's criminal." "It's legal," Isabel corrected bitterly. "Morally wrong, but perfectly legal." "What will you do?" Before Isabel could answer, Mila appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Mom, why are you sad again? Did something happen to Daddy's things?" Isabel's heart clenched. How much longer could she protect them from the truth? How do you tell a 7-year-old that the world can be cruel, that family doesn't always mean love, that sometimes bad people win? "Just some grown-up stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." But Mila's mathematical mind was already working. "Is it about money? I heard you talking to Grandma about money yesterday." Out of the mouths of babes, Isabel forced a smile. "We're going to be fine, sweetheart. Go finish your homework." After Mrs. Patterson left, promising to help however she could, Isabel found herself standing in Tyson's closet, surrounded by his clothes, his shoes, his cologne still lingering in the air. This room had been their sanctuary, where they'd talked about dreams and plans, where he'd held her during thunderstorms, where they'd whispered about their future when the children were asleep. She pulled out the shoebox where he'd kept important papers. Birth certificates for the children, their marriage license, insurance policies. Everything looked normal, legitimate. So why did she feel like she'd been living a lie? At the bottom of the box, she found something she'd never seen before. A business card for a lawyer named Gage Olson, with a handwritten note on the back. "If anything happens to me, call this number. Trust no one else. T." Isabel stared at the card, her heart pounding. When had Tyson written this? Why hadn't he told her about another lawyer? And what did he mean by "trust no one else"? She reached for her phone, then stopped. It was after 6 p.m. The office would be closed. And what would she say? "My dead husband left me your business card." Besides, what could another lawyer do? The will had been read, the inheritance distributed. $5 was $5, no matter how many legal opinions she sought. But as Isabel tucked the business card into her purse next to the $5 bill, a tiny seed of hope planted itself in her chest. Maybe, just maybe, Tyson had left her one final gift. Not money, but answers. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she would call Gage Olson and see if her husband had left her anything more than heartbreak and humiliation. She had no idea that tomorrow, December 15th, was exactly the day Gage Olson had been waiting for, or that the envelope on his desk contained enough surprises to change her life forever. Tonight, though, there were still children to feed, homework to supervise, and the pretense of normalcy to maintain. Tomorrow's revelations would have to wait. December 15th dawned cold and gray, matching Isabel's mood as she watched the children eat breakfast. Bryce pushed his cereal around the bowl while Mila calculated how many Cheerios she had left. Karina hummed softly, a habit she developed since her father's death. "Mom, can we put up Christmas decorations today?" Bryce asked suddenly. "Dad always helped us decorate on December 15th. Isabel's throat tightened. She'd forgotten about their family tradition. Every year, Tyson had insisted they wait until exactly December 15th to transform their house into a winter wonderland. He'd claimed it made Christmas more special when you didn't rush it. "Maybe this weekend, baby," she managed, not wanting to explain that they might not be here long enough to celebrate Christmas in this house. After dropping the children at school, Isabel sat in her car in the parking lot and pulled out Gage Olson's business card. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number, unsure what she would say or what she hoped to accomplish. "Olson and Hendricks Law Firm, this is Rebecca." "Hi, I'd like to speak with Gage Olson, please." "This is Isabel Landry." A pause. Then, "Hold please, Mrs. Landry." Within seconds, a warm male voice came on the line. "Mrs. Landry, I've been expecting your call. My name is Gage Olson. I believe your husband left you my business card." Isabel's heart skipped. "Expecting my call? I don't understand. I think we need to meet in person. Are you available this morning? I can come to you, or you can come to my office. This is... well, it's rather urgent." Something in his tone sparked the first real hope Isabel had felt in months. "Can you come here? I don't want to leave the neighborhood in case the children's school calls." "Of course. What's your address?" 20 minutes later, Isabel watched from her front window as a modest gray sedan pulled into her driveway. The man who stepped out was younger than she'd expected, probably in his early 30s, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it. He wore a simple navy suit and carried a leather briefcase that had seen better days. Gage Olson paused at her blue front door, taking a deep breath before knocking. When Isabel opened it, he was struck by how small she seemed, how the grief and stress had carved hollows under her dark eyes. But there was strength there too, a quiet dignity that reminded him why Tyson had fought so hard to protect her. "Mrs. Landry, thank you for agreeing to see me. Please, call me Isabel. Come in." She led him to the living room, the same room where she'd cried after yesterday's humiliation. Gage noticed the family photos, the children's artwork on the refrigerator, the small touches that made this house a home despite its modest size. "Can I get you coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." Gage sat on the edge of the couch, his briefcase on his lap. "Isabel, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. I need you to bear with me." Isabel sat across from him, gripping her hands together. "Yesterday, I was told my husband left me $5. Nothing sounds impossible anymore." Gage's jaw tightened. "I heard about yesterday's meeting. That's exactly why I'm here." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick legal document. "Your husband came to see me 6 months before his death. He suspected his family would try to disinherit you and the children, so he created a second will." "A real will?" Isabel stared at the document in his hands. "A second will? But Felix le said." Felix le read the will Tyson wanted his family to see, the one designed to make them show their true colors. Gage leaned forward. "Isabel, your husband didn't leave you $5. He left you everything. And I mean everything." The words hit Isabel like a physical blow. She felt dizzy, disconnected from reality. "That's not possible. Tyson didn't have money. We lived paycheck to paycheck. The house belongs to his family." "The house your husband bought and paid for 3 years ago, yes. Along with the house in Bexley worth $1.2 million, the condo in Miami, the investment portfolio worth $15 million, and the offshore accounts totaling another $28 million. Isabel's vision blurred. She gripped the arm of her chair, certain she was having some kind of breakdown. "You're talking about someone else. My husband was a mid-level insurance adjuster. He drove a 10-year-old Honda. He shopped at discount stores." Gage pulled out a manila folder and spread photos across the coffee table. Properties, bank statements, investment summaries. "Your husband was much more than an insurance adjuster, Isabel. He owned 3 successful companies operating under different names. He had real estate investments across 5 states. He was worth approximately $45 million. $45 million? Isabel whispered the words like they belonged to a foreign language. His family never knew because he was very careful to keep his business ventures separate from the Landry name. He used his middle name, Andrew, for all his business dealings. Andrew Corona Holdings, Andrew Corona Investments, Andrew Corona Properties. Isabel's maiden name. He'd used her maiden name for his secret empire. Why? The question came out as a sob. Why would he hide this from me? Why would he let me worry about money, let me work at that community center job, let me stress about bills? Gage's expression softened. Because he wanted to protect you. He knew his family would never stop trying to destroy anything he loved. If they'd known about his wealth, they would have fought him constantly, maybe even tried to have him declared incompetent. This way, he could live a normal life with you and the children while building security for your future. But I could have helped. We could have shared the burden. He was planning to tell you everything on your 10th wedding anniversary next year. He had it all mapped out. A surprise vacation to Europe where he'd explain everything, show you the properties, introduce you to his business partners. He wanted it to be a celebration, not a crisis. Isabel stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Outside, her neighbor was raking leaves, such a normal activity it seemed surreal. This is insane. People don't just hide $45 million from their spouses. People who love their families enough to sacrifice their own recognition do. Gage joined her at the window. Your husband spent 6 years building an empire in secret. Also, you and your children would never have to depend on people who clearly despise you. The meeting yesterday was exactly what he expected. He knew they'd try to humiliate you, knew they'd leave you with nothing. That's why he made the second will conditional. I could only reveal it after they showed their true nature. Isabel turned to face him, studying his serious gray eyes. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't some cruel joke? Without a word, Gage pulled out his phone and dialed a number. Caleb Lamb, please. Tell him it's Gage Olson calling about the Landry account. Within moments, a professional voice came through the speaker. Mr. Olson, good morning. Are you ready to transfer account access to Mrs. Landry? Caleb, I'm here with Isabel Landry. Can you please confirm the current balance of the primary account? Certainly. Mrs. Landry, the primary checking account shows a current balance of $2,847,293.18. The investment accounts show a total value of $15,234,671.09 as of this morning's opening bell. Would you like me to detail the real estate holdings as well? Isabel's legs gave out. She sank onto the couch, staring at the phone as if it might explode. This is real. Very real, Caleb's voice continued. Your husband was quite specific about today being the earliest we could contact you. He wanted to ensure certain family dynamics played out first. After Gage hung up, silence filled the room. Isabel looked around her modest living room, at the discount furniture and clearance store decorations, trying to reconcile this space with the numbers she'd just heard. The children, she said suddenly. My God, the children. They're heirs to $45 million and they're eating store-brand cereal. They're eating store-brand cereal because their father wanted them to grow up normal, humble, grateful. He didn't want them to become entitled like his own family. Isabel laughed, a sound caught between hysteria and relief. Yesterday, I was calculating whether I could afford ramen noodles for dinner. Today you're telling me I'm worth $45 million. Today I'm telling you that your husband loved you enough to plan for every contingency, including his own death. Gage sat back down, his expression serious. But Isabel, this comes with responsibilities. And dangers. Dangers. The Landry family isn't going to take this quietly. When they find out about the real will, they'll fight. They'll claim Tyson was mentally incompetent, that you manipulated him, that the second will is fraudulent. They have resources and connections. Isabel felt the familiar weight of fear settling on her shoulders. So what do? We fight back. But first, we need to secure everything. Transfer accounts, update legal documents, make sure they can't freeze any assets while they contest the will. It's going to take several days of intensive legal work. Several days. I'll need you to come to my office, meet with bank representatives, sign dozens of documents. We'll also need to visit some of the properties so you can see what you've inherited. Gage paused. Isabel, for the next week at least, we're going to be spending a lot of time together. I hope that's not a problem. Isabel looked at this stranger who was offering to turn her world upside down, who claimed her dead husband had trusted him with secrets worth millions. Everything logical told her to be suspicious, to demand more proof, to protect herself and her children. But something in Gage's gray eyes reminded her of Tyson. The same quiet integrity, the same careful consideration before speaking. If Tyson had trusted this man with their future, maybe she could too. Where do we start? She asked. Gage smiled for the first time since he'd arrived. We start by getting you into that hidden estate your husband bought for you. The one worth more than everything the Landry family owns combined. There's a house. There's a compound. 12 acres in Delaware County, completely private, with a main house, guest house, and enough security to keep unwanted family members away permanently. For the first time in 3 months, Isabel felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe, just maybe, her children's future was secure after all. When can we see it? She asked. Right now, if you want. The children are in school until 3 p.m. We have time. Isabel stood, grabbed her purse, and looked around the living room one more time. When she came back to this house tonight, everything would be different. She would be different. Let's go see what my husband really left us, she said. As they walked toward Gage's car, Isabel realized she wasn't just gaining an inheritance. She was gaining an ally, someone who understood the legal complexities ahead and was willing to stand with her against the Landry family's inevitable assault. She had no idea that she was also gaining something she'd never expected to find again, the possibility of love. The drive to Delaware County took them through rolling hills dotted with horse farms and estates that spoke of generational wealth. Isabel sat in stunned silence, watching the landscape change from suburban Columbus to something that belonged in a luxury magazine. How did he afford all this? She asked as Gage turned onto a private road marked only by a discreet sign reading, Corona Estate. Your husband was brilliant with investments. He started small, buying distressed properties and flipping them while working his insurance job. Then he moved into commercial real estate, then tech startups. Everything he touched seemed to turn to gold. They approached massive iron gates set between stone pillars. Gage pressed a code into a keypad, and the gate swung open silently. He gave you the access code? Isabel asked. He gave me everything you'd need to take over completely. Bank codes, property deeds, business contacts. Your husband planned for every detail. The driveway curved through mature oak trees for nearly half a mile before opening onto a vista that made Isabel gasp. The main house rose before them like something from a fairy tale, built of honey-colored limestone with soaring windows and a circular tower that caught the afternoon light. This is mine, she whispered. This is yours. The house was magnificent but not ostentatious. It felt warm despite its size, designed for a family rather than show. Wide terraces overlooked gardens that even in December showed signs of careful planning. A smaller house sat nestled among trees to the left, connected by a covered walkway. "The guest house," Gage explained, noticing her gaze. "Your husband designed it specifically for when your mother visits. He said he wanted her to feel welcome but still have privacy." Isabel's eyes filled with tears. Even in his secret planning, Tyson had thought of her mother's comfort. They parked in a circular drive in front of the main entrance. Gage pulled out an ornate key and handed it to Isabel. "He wanted you to be the first to open the door." Isabel's hands shook as she turned the key in the lock. The heavy wooden door swung open to reveal a foyer with polished marble floors and a crystal chandelier that cast rainbows across the walls. But what caught her attention was the enormous portrait hanging on the far wall. It was their family. All 5 of them. Painted from a photo taken at a county fair last summer, showing Tyson with his arms around Isabel while the triplets made silly faces at the camera. In this grand setting, the casual joy of that moment felt even more precious. "When did he have this painted?" Isabel asked. 2 months before the accident. He said he wanted your faces to be the first thing anyone saw when they entered your real home." Gage led her through rooms that belonged in architectural magazines. A kitchen with restaurant-quality appliances and a breakfast nook that looked out over the gardens. A library with built-in shelves reaching to the vaulted ceiling. A family room with a stone fireplace large enough to roast a pig. But it was the details that broke Isabel's heart. Family photos in silver frames on every surface. A play area clearly designed for 3 7-year-olds, complete with arts and crafts supplies and educational games. In the master bedroom, a walk-in closet with space designated for her clothes, including notes in Tyson's handwriting about her favorite colors and styles. "He was planning to bring us here," she said, touching one of the notes. "For your anniversary. He wanted to surprise you with everything at once." In Tyson's study, Gage pulled out a key and unlocked a mahogany desk drawer. Inside was a leather portfolio tied with a blue ribbon. "He left this for you. Letters explaining everything." Isabel's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon and opened the portfolio. The first letter was dated 6 months before Tyson's death. "My beloved Isabel, if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true and I'm no longer there to protect you and our children. I pray you'll forgive me for the secrets I kept, but I need you to understand why. From the moment I brought you home to meet my family, I saw their faces. The disapproval, the barely concealed racism, the way they looked at you like you were somehow beneath us. I realized then that any wealth connected to the Landry name would come with strings, conditions, and constant battles. So I decided to build something that was ours alone. Every dollar I earned, every investment I made, every property I bought was done in your maiden name because I wanted our children to inherit something pure, something my family could never touch or diminish." Isabel wiped tears from her cheeks as she continued reading. "I know you're wondering why I didn't tell you. The truth is, I was scared. Scared you'd think I was keeping secrets because I didn't trust you. Scared you'd want to flaunt our wealth and draw my family's attention. Scared that knowing about the money would change the beautiful simplicity of our life together. You made me happy living in that little house with your discount store furniture and homemade curtains. You never asked for more, never made me feel like I had to prove my worth with expensive things. I didn't want money to complicate that joy." The next letter detailed his business dealings, his investment strategies, and his careful planning to keep everything separate from his family's influence. By the time you read this, you'll own Corona Holdings outright. The businesses are solid, the investments are diversified, and the management teams I've put in place are people I trust completely. You'll never have to worry about money again, but more importantly, our children will grow up with choices my family never gave me. Isabel found a separate letter addressed to the children. "My precious Bryce, Mila, and Karina, Daddy loves you more than all the stars in the sky. If you're reading this when you're older, I hope you understand that everything I built was for you. Not so you could buy fancy things or show off, but so you could follow your dreams without fear. Bryce, if you want to be a professional soccer player, you can afford the best training and never worry about making money. Mila, if you want to be a mathematician like you're always talking about, you can attend any university in the world. Karina, whatever makes your beautiful heart sing, you can pursue it fully. Remember that money is a tool, not a purpose. Use it to help others, to make the world better, to honor your mother who is the strongest and most beautiful person I've ever known. Gage watched Isabel read, noting how her posture gradually straightened, how strength seemed to flow back into her frame with each page. There's more, he said gently. About Felix, Lou, and your in-laws. Isabel turned to the final section, and her expression hardened. I need you to know that Felix Lou is not working in your best interests. I have evidence that my family has been paying him for information about my affairs for years. I suspect they also bribed him to create the false will you probably heard yesterday. I've documented everything. Bank transfers from my father to Felix's personal account, recorded conversations where Felix agreed to handle the Isabel problem, and copies of the fake will they prepared. Gage Olson has all the evidence you'll need to destroy them legally. Not just Felix, but my parents and anyone else who participated in this scheme. They committed fraud, conspiracy, and probably several other felonies in their attempt to steal from you and our children. Make them pay, Isabel. Not for revenge, but for justice. Make sure they can never hurt another family the way they tried to hurt ours. Isabel set down the letters, her sadness transforming into something harder, more determined. You have evidence against them? Gage nodded and pulled out another folder. Recorded phone calls, bank records, email exchanges. Your husband was thorough. Felix took over $200,000 in bribes to manipulate the estate proceedings. And my in-laws? Conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted theft by deception, and a few other charges that could result in serious jail time. Isabel stood and walked to the window overlooking the gardens. In the distance, she could see a playground built for 3 children, with swings and slides and a treehouse that Tyson had probably planned to build with his own hands. They tried to take everything from my children. They mocked me, humiliated me, made me believe my husband didn't love us. What do you want to do about it? Isabel turned back to Gage, and he was struck by the transformation in her face. The broken, desperate woman from this morning had been replaced by someone who looked like she could take on the world. I want to prosecute them. All of them. I want Felix disbarred and imprisoned. I want my in-laws to face consequences for what they tried to do. It won't be easy. They'll hire expensive lawyers, claim they were misled by Felix, try to paint you as a gold digger who manipulated their son. Let them try. Isabel's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I have something they don't have. What's that? The truth. And apparently, enough money to make sure the truth wins. Gage found himself smiling, impressed by her transformation. There's one more thing. Your husband left instructions about his life insurance policy. The $500,000 that paid for his funeral? That was just the basic policy his family knew about. There's another policy for $2 million that they never knew existed. Isabel shook her head in amazement. Is there anything he didn't think of? He thought of everything because he loved you that much. The question now is, what do you want to do first? Isabel looked around the study, at the evidence of her husband's secret devotion, at the proof that every day of their marriage had been real despite what his family tried to make her believe. First, I want to pick up my children and bring them home. Their real home. And then, Isabel's smile was fierce and beautiful. Then we destroy the people who tried to destroy us. As they prepared to leave the estate, Gage realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Isabel Landry wasn't just inheriting wealth. She was inheriting power, confidence, and the knowledge that she'd been loved completely by a man who'd planned for her happiness even beyond his own death. She was also, though neither of them realized it yet, about to change his life as completely as he was changing hers. The ride back to pick up the children passed in comfortable silence, both Isabel and Gage processing the magnitude of what they'd discovered. Isabel found herself stealing glances at the man beside her, this stranger who'd become her ally in the span of a few hours. "Can I ask you something?" Isabel said as they pulled into the elementary school parking lot. "Of course. Why did Tyson choose you? I mean, there are hundreds of lawyers in Columbus. What made him trust you with something this important?" Gage was quiet for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel. 3 years ago, my sister died in a car accident. She left behind 2 kids and a husband who couldn't handle being a single parent. The family fought over custody, money, everything. It got ugly fast. "I'm sorry. I represented my brother-in-law pro bono, made sure the kids stayed with him instead of going to relatives who only wanted the life insurance money. Your husband heard about the case, said he was impressed that I'd fought for what was right instead of what was profitable." Isabel studied his profile, noting the way his jaw tightened when he talked about his sister. "Did you win?" "We won. The kids are doing great now, and their father remarried a wonderful woman who loves them like her own. But it taught me that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes the people who love you most aren't related to you at all." The comment hung between them as they watched children stream out of Riverside Elementary. Isabel spotted her 3 immediately. Bryce was carrying a soccer ball, Mila had her nose in a math workbook, and Karina was helping a smaller child with a backpack. "There they are," Isabel said, her voice soft with love. "They look just like their father," Gage observed. "They have his heart, too. Always helping others, always thinking about people who need kindness." The children piled into the back seat of Gage's car with the easy acceptance of 7-year-olds. Isabel made introductions, explaining that Gage was Daddy's friend, who was helping with some important business. "Are you a lawyer like on TV?" Bryce asked, buckling his seatbelt. "I am, but it's much more boring than TV," Gage replied with a smile. "Mostly I read a lot of papers and talked to people about contracts." "Do you have kids?" Mila wanted to know. "No, but I have a nephew and niece about your age. They love soccer just like your brother." "Can they come play sometime?" Karina asked hopefully. Isabel's heart clenched. These children had lost so much, yet they still reached out for new connections, new possibilities for friendship and joy. "Maybe someday," Gage said gently. Instead of returning to Elm Grove Avenue, Gage drove to his law office downtown. "I know it's after school, but we need to start the paperwork today. The sooner we get everything legally transferred, the better protected you'll be." The law firm of Olson & Hendricks occupied the 3rd floor of a restored brick building in the Short North District. It wasn't fancy, but it felt solid, trustworthy. Randy Hendricks greeted them warmly, his kind eyes immediately focusing on the children. "You must be the famous Triplets I've heard so much about," he said, crouching to their level. "We have a break room with snacks and some games. Would you like to explore while your mom handles some boring grown-up stuff?" The children looked to Isabel for permission. She nodded, and Randy led them away, already asking about their favorite subjects in school. "He's good with kids," Isabel observed. "He has 4 of his own." Sometimes this place sounds more like a daycare than a law office. In Gage's private office, they spread documents across a conference table. Bank account transfers, property deeds, business incorporation papers. The sheer volume was overwhelming. "This is going to take hours," Isabel said, looking at the stack of papers requiring her signature. "We can work through it together. But first, we need to discuss strategy. Your in-laws are going to find out about the real Will soon. We should be prepared for their reaction." As if summoned by their conversation, Gage's phone rang. The caller ID showed Felix Lee's office number. "Should I answer it?" Gage asked. "Put it on speaker. I want to hear what he has to say." Gage pressed the speaker button. "Gage Olson. Mr. Olson, this is Felix Liu. I understand you've been in contact with Isabel Landry regarding her late husband's estate." "That's correct." I'm calling to inform you that any interference with the properly executed will of Tyson Landry could result in legal action. The estate has been settled according to his wishes. Isabel leaned forward. This is Isabel Landry, Mr. Liu. I'm curious about your definition of properly executed. A pause. Mrs. Landry, I'm not sure what you think you've discovered, but I can assure you that your husband's will was legally binding and has been properly probated, including the $200,000 you received from the Landry family to falsify that will. The silence on the other end stretched so long that Isabel wondered if the call had dropped. I don't know what you're talking about, Felix finally said, but his voice had lost its confident tone. Gage pulled out one of Tyson's files and read from it. February 18th, $25,000 wire transfer from Valentine Landry to your personal account. March 12th, $50,000. July 8th, $75,000. August 23rd, $50,000. Should I continue? Those were legitimate legal fees for family business. Family business that involved creating a false will to disinherit a widow and 3 children? Isabel's voice was ice cold. I think the Ohio State Bar Association would be very interested in reviewing those transactions. You can't prove anything, Felix said, but he sounded panicked now. Actually, we can. We have recorded conversations, bank records, and copies of the real will that you helped suppress. Oh, and Felix, the real will leaves everything to me and my children. Everything. The line went dead. Gage looked at Isabel with admiration. That was beautiful. You just put him on notice that we have everything we need to destroy him. Good. Now he'll have to decide whether to keep lying or cut a deal to save himself. As they worked through the paperwork, Isabel found herself relaxing in ways she hadn't since Tyson's death. Gage was patient, explaining each document clearly, never making her feel stupid for asking questions. When she stumbled over legal terminology, he found simpler ways to explain complex concepts. You're a good teacher, she said during a break. Very patient. You're a quick learner. And you ask smart questions. Their hands brushed as they reached for the same document, and both felt a spark of awareness that had nothing to do with legal paperwork. Isabel pulled back first, suddenly conscious that she was attracted to this man who was helping her rebuild her life. From the break room came the sound of children's laughter. Randy appeared in the doorway with all 3 kids. I hope you don't mind, but they've reorganized my filing system, he said with a grin. Apparently Mila has strong opinions about alphabetical order. The files were all mixed up. Mila protested. Some were by last name, some by first name, some by date. It was chaos. Mathematical chaos, Bryce added solemnly, as if this was the worst kind. And Mr. Hendricks had old candy in his desk drawer, Karina announced. The chocolate was all white and weird. Isabel laughed, the sound surprising her. When was the last time she'd laughed? Really laughed, not just polite chuckling but genuine amusement at her children's observations? I'm sorry, she said to Randy. They're very helpful, but sometimes... They're perfect, Randy interrupted. Mila fixed my filing system. Bryce helped me understand the new soccer schedules my kids brought home, and Karina organized my supply closet by color. They're hired. Can we really have jobs here? Bryce asked seriously. Well, there are some pesky child labor laws, Gage said with mock seriousness. But I think we could arrange some volunteer consulting positions. The children giggled, and Isabel felt something shift in her chest. These weren't just legal proceedings anymore. This was her family being welcomed, being treated as valuable, being seen as more than burdens or complications. Mr. Gage, Karina said, tugging on his sleeve, are you going to be our friend now? Like a real friend who comes to birthday parties and stuff. The innocent question hung in the air. Isabel held her breath, not sure why the answer felt so important. I'd like that very much, Gage said seriously. If your mom thinks it's okay. 3 pairs of eyes turned to Isabel expectantly. "I think Mr. Gage has earned an invitation to birthday parties," she said softly. As the afternoon wore on, the work took on an almost festive atmosphere. The children helped by organizing papers, Randy provided a steady stream of snacks and terrible lawyer jokes, and Gage's initial professional demeanor gave way to something warmer, more personal. "You know," Isabel said as they finished the last set of signatures, "this morning I thought my life was over. Tonight I'm signing papers that make me one of the wealthiest women in Ohio. It doesn't feel real." "It's real," Gage assured her. "Tomorrow we'll start transferring funds, updating ownership records, and making sure you have complete control of everything your husband built for you." "And the criminal case against Felix and my in-laws? We'll file charges by the end of the week. With the evidence we have, it should be straightforward. They'll probably try to plea bargain once they realize we can prove everything." Isabel looked around the conference room, at the evidence of her new life spread across the table, at the man who'd made it all possible, at her children who were adapting to change with the resilience that amazed her daily. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. I know this is just business for you, but for us." "It's not just business," Gage interrupted. "Not anymore." Their eyes met across the table, and Isabel felt something she'd thought was gone forever. Not just gratitude or friendship, but the flutter of possibility, the whisper of attraction, the hint that maybe, someday, there could be room in her heart for someone new. She wasn't ready for it yet. The grief was still too fresh, the changes too overwhelming. But for the first time since Tyson's death, Isabel could imagine a future that included not just survival, but happiness. As they gathered their things to leave, Karina slipped her small hand into Gage's. "Thank you for helping Mommy," she said seriously. "Daddy would like you." Gage squeezed her hand gently. "I would have liked your daddy too." And as they walked out into the December evening, Isabel realized that the broken family that had entered this building that afternoon was leaving as something new. Not healed, not yet, but healing. Not whole, but becoming whole again in ways she'd never expected. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new battles to fight. But tonight, for the first time in months, Isabel Landry felt like she might actually win. The attack came at 6 a.m. on December 17th. Isabel was making breakfast for the children when her phone exploded with calls. Unknown numbers, blocked numbers, reporters from 3 different news stations. She turned off the ringer and tried to focus on scrambled eggs and toast, but her hands were shaking. "Mommy, why does your phone keep lighting up?" Mila asked, spooning cereal carefully to avoid spills. "Just some work stuff, baby. Eat your breakfast." But when Isabel looked out the front window, her blood turned to ice. A news van was parked across the street, and a reporter was setting up a camera on her lawn. Another van was pulling up behind it. Her phone rang. "Gage. Isabel, don't go outside. Don't answer the door." The Landry family held a press conference this morning. "A press conference? About what?" "About you. They're claiming you manipulated Tyson, isolated him from his family, and forged documents to steal his inheritance. It's all lies, but they're very convincing lies told by people with money and influence." Isabel sank into a kitchen chair, watching her children eat breakfast while reporters gathered outside like vultures. "What did they say exactly?" "That you targeted Tyson because of his family's wealth. That you deliberately got pregnant to trap him. That you kept him away from family gatherings and poisoned his mind against them." Andrea gave a very tearful performance about losing her son to a manipulative woman who never loved him. Each accusation hit Isabel like a physical blow. "But that's not true. They never invited us to family gatherings. They made it clear I wasn't welcome." "I know. But they have photos of family events you weren't at, testimony from relatives about how you changed Tyson, and a very sympathetic narrative about a grieving family being victimized by a gold digger." "Mommy!" Bryce was looking at her with concern. "Are you okay? You look sad again." Isabel forced a smile. I'm fine, sweetheart. Finish your breakfast so you're not late for school. But as she hung up with Gage, Isabel realized that getting the children to school was going to be impossible. The reporters were multiplying outside, and she could see neighbors peeking through curtains, probably wondering what kind of criminal lived next door. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Patterson. Saw the news. Bringing the children through my backyard to school. Don't let those vultures upset you. 5 minutes later, Mrs. Patterson knocked on the back door. She took one look at Isabel's pale face and gathered her into a fierce hug. Those people are monsters, she said firmly. Anyone who knows you knows this is garbage. But what if people believe them? What if everyone thinks I'm some kind of con artist who tricked Tyson? Then they're idiots who don't deserve your time. Mrs. Patterson helped the children gather their backpacks. Come on, babies. We're going on an adventure through my garden to get to school. After they left, Isabel sat alone in her kitchen, listening to the growing crowd outside. Her phone continued buzzing with calls from reporters, but also from numbers she recognized. The community center where she worked. Tyson's former colleagues. Parents from the children's school. She answered one call from her supervisor at work. Isabel, I'm so sorry, but we're getting calls from parents asking about your background. The board thinks it might be best if you took some time off until this blows over. You're firing me? Not firing. Just temporary leave. Until things calm down. Isabel hung up, realizing that her small income was gone too. Not that money mattered anymore, but the job had given her purpose, connection to her community. Now even that was being stripped away. The doorbell rang insistently. Then came pounding on the door. Mrs. Landry, Channel 6 News. We'd like to get your side of the story. Mrs. Landry, do you have any comment on the family's allegations? Isabel closed all the curtains and retreated to the back of the house, but she could still hear their voices, their questions designed to make her sound guilty no matter how she answered. Around noon, Gage arrived through the back gate, his expression grim. It's bad, he said without preamble. They filed an emergency motion to freeze all the estate assets, claiming fraud. They've also filed a civil lawsuit accusing you of undue influence and seeking to overturn both wills. Can they do that? They can try. The judge who's hearing the motion is Harold Whitman. He's old school, traditional, and he's known the Landry family for 30 years. Isabel felt the walls closing in. So he'll believe them over me. Maybe. But I've requested an expedited hearing for tomorrow. We'll present our evidence about the bribes, the conspiracy, the recorded conversations. The truth will win, Isabel, but it's going to be brutal. How brutal? Gage hesitated. They're going to attack everything. Your character, your marriage, your fitness as a mother. They'll claim you're unstable, that you're using the children as pawns, that you seduced Tyson away from his loving family. The phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed the children's school. Mrs. Landry, this is Principal Morrison. I'm calling because some parents have expressed concerns about the news reports. We think it might be best if Bryce, Mila, and Karina stayed home for a few days until this situation resolves. Are you saying my children aren't welcome at school? Not permanently. Just until the media attention dies down. Some parents are worried about the disruption. Isabel hung up, feeling like she was drowning. Her job was gone, her children were being excluded from school, and reporters were camping on her lawn treating her like a criminal. This is what they wanted, she said quietly. Not just the money. They wanted to destroy me completely. Gage moved closer, his voice gentle. Isabel, look at me. This is temporary. We have evidence they can't fight. We have Tyson's own words explaining everything. Do we? Or do we have documents that a grieving widow could have forged? A conspiracy theory about bribes that a desperate woman might have invented? You don't believe that. I don't know what I believe anymore. Isabel walked to the window and peeked through the curtains. More vans had arrived. Maybe they're right. Maybe I did manipulate him somehow. Maybe I was so desperate to be part of a family that I made him choose between me and his real family. That's not true, and you know it. Do I? I keep thinking about things differently now. How quickly he married me. How he kept me away from family events. Maybe he was ashamed of me. Isabel, stop. But the doubt was spreading like poison through her mind. They have photos of family gatherings I wasn't invited to. What if Tyson told them I didn't want to come? What if he was protecting them from me instead of protecting me from them? Gage grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Listen to me. I knew your husband for 3 years. I saw how he talked about you, how his whole face lit up when he mentioned your name. That man worshipped you. He didn't hide you from his family because he was ashamed. He hid his wealth from you because he wanted to protect the beautiful life you'd built together. But what if you're wrong? What if everyone else is right and I'm just a gold digger who doesn't deserve any of this? Then why am I fighting for you? Gage's voice was intense, urgent. Why would I risk my career, my reputation, everything I've built, for someone who doesn't deserve it? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to address. I don't know, Isabel whispered. Maybe you're just a good person who got fooled like everyone else. Gage stepped back as if she'd slapped him. You really believe that? You think I'm that naive? I think you believed my husband, and maybe my husband was better at lying than any of us realized. So you're giving up. You're going to let them win. Isabel looked around the kitchen where she'd made thousands of meals for her family, where Tyson had helped the children with homework, where they'd planned their future together. But now even these memories felt tainted, uncertain. Maybe I should. Maybe the children would be better off if I just walked away. Let them have the money. Let them raise Bryce, Mila, and Karina in their world of privilege and respectability. You don't mean that. Don't I? Look what's happening to them because of me. They can't even go to school because their mother is a scandal. How is that fair to them? Gage stared at her, seeing the woman who'd fought so fiercely yesterday crumbling under the weight of public scrutiny and self-doubt. You know what? Maybe you're right, he said, his voice cold. Maybe you don't deserve any of this if you're going to give up at the first real challenge. The words hit Isabel like ice water. What did you say? You heard me. Your husband spent years building something for you and your children. He trusted me to make sure you got it. But if you're going to fold the moment things get difficult, maybe the Landry family is right about you. Isabel's eyes blazed with sudden fury. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell you the truth. Your children are watching you right now, learning what it means to fight for what's right or give up when people are cruel. What are you teaching them? I'm trying to protect them. You're trying to protect yourself. You're scared that maybe, deep down, you're not good enough for the life Tyson wanted to give you. The accusation hung in the air like a thrown gauntlet. Isabel felt something break inside her, not from grief this time, but from rage. Get out, she said quietly. Isabel. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. If you think I'm weak, if you think I don't deserve this, then you can join them in believing I'm nothing but a fraud. Gage stood at the back door, his hand on the handle. For what it's worth, I don't think you're weak. I think you're scared. And I think you're making the biggest mistake of your life. Then I guess that's my choice to make. After he left, Isabel sank to the kitchen floor and cried until she had no tears left. Outside, the reporters continued their vigil, waiting for her to emerge so they could capture her shame for the evening news. She'd lost everything again. Her job, her children's school, her ally, and maybe her faith in her own worthiness. The Landry family had won without even setting foot in a courtroom. But as Isabel sat on her kitchen floor, surrounded by the wreckage of her hopes, She didn't know that Gage was sitting in his car 3 blocks away, hating himself for the words he'd spoken. Or that her children were at school, telling anyone who would listen that their mother was the strongest, kindest, most wonderful person in the world. She didn't know that the truth was about to find its own way to the surface, with or without her help. And she definitely didn't know that sometimes you have to fall completely apart before you can rebuild yourself into someone strong enough to fight back. Isabel spent the night on her kitchen floor, surrounded by the scattered pieces of her life. The reporters had finally left around midnight, but their questions echoed in her mind. Did you target Tyson for his money? How do you respond to claims you isolated him from his family? What's your reaction to being called a gold digger? At 3 a.m., her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Saw the news in Atlanta. Flying up tomorrow. You don't face this alone. At 4 a.m., Mrs. Patterson knocked softly on the back door. I brought tea and common sense, she said, letting herself in. She found Isabel still on the floor, staring at nothing. They're going to take my children, Isabel whispered. That's what this is really about. They want Bryce, Mila, and Karina. The money is just the excuse. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her on the cold tile. Over my dead body. Those children belong with their mother. What if I'm not good enough? What if the Landry family really can give them better lives? Private schools, opportunities, connections I could never provide. Money doesn't make a family, dear. Love does. And those children have never doubted for 1 second that you love them completely. At sunrise, Isabel forced herself to shower and dress. She had to pick up the children from Mrs. Patterson's house where they'd spent the night. She had to pretend their world wasn't collapsing. She found them in Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, eating pancakes and arguing about multiplication tables. Mommy! Karina launched herself into Isabel's arms. Mrs. Patterson makes funny-shaped pancakes. Look, mine's supposed to be a butterfly, but it looks more like a chicken. A mathematically impossible chicken, Mila added seriously. The proportions are all wrong. I like impossible chickens, Bryce said, cutting his pancake into smaller pieces. They're more interesting than regular chickens. Isabel held them close, breathing in their innocence, their resilience, their absolute faith that she would fix whatever was wrong with their world. Mom, some kids at school yesterday said mean things about you on the news, Mila said quietly. But we told them the news people were wrong. You're not mean. You're the best mom ever. Isabel's heart shattered and healed simultaneously. What kind of mean things? That you only married Daddy for money, Bryce said with 7-year-old indignation. But that's stupid because we never had lots of money. We shop at the discount store and you clip coupons. And you work really hard at your job helping people, Karina added. Mean people don't help other people for almost no money. Their simple logic cut through weeks of self-doubt. These children knew her better than anyone. They'd watched her sacrifice, struggle, choose love over comfort every single day. If anyone could judge her character, it was them. Are we in trouble? Mila asked with her usual directness. Isabel looked at their trusting faces and made a choice. Not the choice to give up, but the choice to fight. For them. For Tyson's memory. For the truth. No, baby. We're not in trouble. Some people are trying to take things that belong to us, but we're going to stop them. How? Bryce wanted to know. By being brave. By telling the truth. By remembering that Daddy loved us and wanted us to have good lives. Meanwhile, across town, Gage sat in his office staring at case files he couldn't concentrate on. Randy had been shooting him worried glances all morning, finally breaking the silence around 10 a.m. You look like hell. And you've been snapping at everyone since yesterday. What happened with Isabel? I said things I shouldn't have said. I pushed her when she was already breaking. Why? Gage ran his hands through his hair. Because I was scared she was going to give up. Because I couldn't stand watching her doubt herself when I know what kind of person she is. And because I'm in love with her. The admission hung in the air like a confession. I'm in love with a grieving widow with 3 kids and a legal case that could destroy my career, and instead of supporting her, I attacked her when she needed me most. Randy poured coffee from the office pot and set it in front of Gage. So what are you going to do about it? Nothing. She told me to get out of her life. She's probably right. She doesn't need the complication of feelings she's not ready for. Or maybe she needs to know that someone believes in her completely, even when she doesn't believe in herself. Before Gage could respond, his secretary knocked on the door. Mr. Olson, there's a Felix Lou here to see you. He says it's urgent. Felix Lou looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his hands shaking as he sat across from Gage's desk. They're going to destroy me, he said without preamble. The Landry family. They're cutting me loose. I'm not sure what you expect me to do about that. I have information about their real finances, their business dealings, things that would interest the FBI. Gage leaned back in his chair. I'm listening. Valentine Landry has been laundering money through overseas accounts for years. Tax evasion, fraud, conspiracy. I have records of everything because I helped set up some of the transactions. Why are you telling me this? Felix's laugh was bitter. Because they threw me under the bus the moment things got complicated. 40 years of loyal service, and Andrea Landry told me this morning that I'm an unfortunate liability they need to eliminate. What do you want in return for this information? Immunity. And maybe a chance to do one thing right before my career ends. Gage studied the broken man across from his desk. One thing right. I know what they did to that woman yesterday. The press conference, the character assassination. It was planned, coordinated, vicious. They have no intention of letting her keep a penny of that inheritance, and they don't care how many lives they destroy to get their way. Including 3 innocent children? They're already talking about claiming Isabel is an unfit mother. They want custody of the kids along with the money. Gage felt ice in his veins. On what grounds? Mental instability. They're planning to argue that the stress of being exposed as a fraud has made her dangerous to her own children. They have a psychiatrist ready to testify that her behavior pattern shows clear signs of delusional thinking. That's insane. That's the Landry family. They don't just win. They annihilate. After Felix left with his boxes of evidence, Gage sat alone in his office facing the biggest decision of his career. He could play it safe, follow proper procedures, file the evidence through normal channels and hope the system worked. Or he could take a massive risk, go directly to Isabel, and give her the weapon she needed to fight back immediately. The safe choice protected his career but left Isabel vulnerable for days or weeks while the legal system moved at its typical glacial pace. The risky choice meant acting outside normal protocols but could save her from further destruction. He thought about her children's faces, about the way Isabel had looked when she told him to leave, about the pain in her voice when she'd questioned her own worthiness. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Gage grabbed his coat and the box of evidence Felix had provided. He drove to Elm Grove Avenue, where thankfully the media circus had moved on to other scandals. He knocked on Isabel's back door, not sure if she would even let him in. Isabel opened the door, her expression guarded. What do you want? To apologize, and to give you the ammunition you need to destroy the people trying to destroy you. She studied his face for a long moment. I'm listening. Felix Lou came to my office this morning. He's ready to confess everything. The bribes, the conspiracy, all of it. But more than that, he has evidence that your in-laws have been committing federal crimes for decades. Isabel stepped aside to let him in. What kind of crimes? Money laundering, tax evasion, fraud. Enough to put both Valentine and Andrea in federal prison for years. And Isabel, They're planning to claim you're mentally unstable to get custody of your children. The color drained from Isabel's face. They want my babies. They want everything. But we can stop them. We can end this completely, but I need to know you're ready to fight. Really fight. Isabel looked toward the living room where her children were building something elaborate with blocks. The sound of their laughter, their complete trust in her ability to protect them, filled the kitchen. "Yesterday you said I was weak," she said quietly. "Yesterday I was an idiot who said exactly the wrong thing at exactly the wrong moment. I was scared you were going to give up, and instead of supporting you, I attacked you. I'm sorry. Why does this matter so much to you?" The question he'd been avoiding, the truth he wasn't sure he was ready to speak. But looking at her standing in her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of the life she'd built with love and determination, Gage realized that some truths couldn't wait for perfect timing. "Because I'm in love with you," he said simply. "Because watching you doubt yourself is killing me. Because your husband trusted me to protect his family, and that includes protecting you from people who want to convince you that you're less than you are." Isabel stared at him, processing his words. "You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're the strongest person I've ever met. I know you love your children more than your own life. I know you're worth fighting for, even if you don't believe it right now." The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of children playing and the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Two people standing at a crossroads, deciding whether to choose fear or courage, isolation or connection, defeat or victory. "What do you need me to do?" Isabel asked finally. Gage smiled, seeing the fighter returning to her eyes. "I need you to trust me one more time. And I need you to get ready to take down the most powerful family in Columbus. Together! Together!" And in that moment, both of them chose courage over safety, truth over convenience, and each other over the easier path of staying apart. The real battle was about to begin. The emergency hearing was scheduled for December 20th at 9 a.m. in Judge Harold Whitman's courtroom. Isabel arrived with Gage, carrying herself with a dignity that surprised the reporters still lingering outside the courthouse. She wore a simple navy dress, her hair pulled back, looking every inch the grieving widow she was rather than the gold digger they'd painted her to be. The Landry family had assembled an army. 3 expensive lawyers in matching suits, Valentine and Andrea dressed like they were attending a charity gala, and 2 additional family members to show their united front. They exuded confidence, the certainty of people who'd never lost a fight that mattered. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harold Whitman." Judge Whitman was exactly what Gage had feared. 72 years old, traditional, and clearly someone who'd socialized with the Landry family for decades. His expression when he looked at Isabel was cool, skeptical. "This is an emergency motion to freeze estate assets pending investigation of fraud allegations," Judge Whitman began. "Mr. Carlisle, you represent the Landry family?" The lead attorney was smooth, polished, expensive. "Yes, Your Honor. We're here because a grieving family has discovered that their son's estate was manipulated through forged documents and undue influence." "Serious allegations. What evidence do you present?" For the next hour, Carlisle painted a picture of Isabel as a calculating predator who'd isolated Tyson from his loving family, forced him to change his will under duress, and was now using forged documents to steal millions. He presented affidavits from family members, photos of gatherings Isabel hadn't attended, and testimony from Tyson's former colleagues claiming he'd seemed different and distant in his final months. Isabel felt each accusation like a physical blow, but Gage's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. When Carlisle finished, Judge Whitman turned to them. "Mr. Olson, your response?" Gage stood with calm confidence. "Your Honor, everything Mr. Carlisle just presented is based on lies orchestrated by his clients. With the court's permission, I'd like to call Felix Liu to the stand." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Felix Liu hadn't been expected, and his presence clearly surprised the Landry legal team. Felix walked to the witness stand like a man heading to his own execution. After being sworn in, Gage began his questioning. "Mr. Liu, How long have you been the Landry family's attorney? 42 years. And during that time, did Valentine and Andrea Landry ever ask you to do anything illegal regarding their son's estate? Felix looked directly at his former clients, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. Yes. Beginning 6 months ago, they asked me to create a false will that would disinherit Isabel Landry and her children. The courtroom erupted. Judge Whitman's gavel rang out repeatedly. They paid me $200,000 over several months to create documents that looked official but contained language they dictated. The real will, the one Tyson Landry actually signed, left everything to his wife and children. Gage moved to the evidence table. Your Honor, I'd like to present exhibits A through M. Bank records showing payments from Valentine Landry to Felix Lee's personal account, recorded conversations where the conspiracy was discussed, and copies of the authentic will that Mr. Le helped suppress. For the next 2 hours, the Landry family's carefully constructed narrative collapsed completely. The recorded conversations were particularly damaging, featuring Andrea's voice clearly discussing how to get rid of that woman and her mixed-breed children, and Valentine's detailed instructions on manipulating the estate proceedings. But Gage wasn't finished. Your Honor, Mr. Liu has also provided evidence of additional crimes: tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud involving offshore accounts. These documents show systematic criminal activity spanning 15 years. He presented bank records, transaction histories, and correspondence that painted a picture of the Landry family as serial criminals who'd used their attorney to hide millions in illegal income. Furthermore, Gage continued, we have evidence that the defendants planned to claim Mrs. Landry was mentally unstable in order to gain custody of her children. Mr. Liu has recordings of these discussions as well. The final recording was the most damaging. Andrea's voice, clear and venomous. Once we get the psychiatrist to declare her unfit, we can take the children. They belong with real family, not some ghetto trash who got lucky. The racial slur hung in the courtroom like a toxic cloud. Judge Whitman's expression had shifted from skepticism to disgust. When the prosecution finished presenting evidence, Carlyle attempted damage control, but there was nothing to salvage. His clients had been caught in a conspiracy so blatant, so documented, that denial was impossible. Judge Whitman called a brief recess. When court reconvened, his verdict was swift and decisive. I've heard enough evidence to conclude that the Landry family engaged in conspiracy, fraud, and attempted theft. The motion to freeze assets is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering an immediate investigation by the district attorney's office into the criminal activities presented today. He turned to Isabel. Mrs. Landry, I apologize that this court's time was wasted with these frivolous and fraudulent claims. Your inheritance is confirmed and protected. As they left the courthouse, Isabel felt like she was floating. The reporters who'd vilified her 3 days earlier were now shouting questions about the Landry family's crimes. The narrative had completely reversed. It's over, she asked Gage as they reached his car. It's over. Valentine and Andrea are looking at federal charges that could put them away for decades. Felix will probably serve 2 to 3 years but avoid major prison time for cooperating. And you, Isabel Landry, are officially one of the wealthiest women in Ohio. That evening, Isabel stood in the kitchen of the Corona estate, watching her children explore their new home with the boundless excitement of 7-year-olds. The house that had seemed impossibly grand was already filling with the sounds of family life. Mommy, my room has a bathroom bigger than our whole kitchen at the old house. Karina called from upstairs. And there's a library with more books than the school library. Mila added, Can we get a dog now? Bryce wanted to know. There's a whole yard for running. Isabel laughed, realizing she could say yes to anything they wanted. The children could have dogs, ponies, their own tutors, anything their hearts desired. But what they wanted most was what they'd always had, a mother who loved them completely. Gage found her on the terrace overlooking the gardens, where outdoor heaters made the December evening comfortable. Regrets? He asked, joining her at the stone railing. About the money. No. About Tyson keeping secrets. I understand now. He was protecting us in the only way he knew how. And about us? Isabel turned to face him. 3 months ago, she'd been a grieving widow certain she'd never love again. Now she was looking at a man who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd risked everything to give her justice, who'd seen her at her lowest point and loved her anyway. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know how to do this. How to love someone new while still honoring Tyson's memory. We'll figure it out together. No pressure, no timeline, just honesty about what we feel. And what do you feel? Gage smiled. I feel like the luckiest man alive. I get to love you and your children, help you build whatever life you want, and maybe, if I'm very lucky, be part of your family. Isabel reached for his hand. Tyson would have liked you. He would have trusted you to take care of us. I hope so. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you never doubt your worth again. 6 months later, on a perfect June morning, Isabel and Gage were married in the gardens of the Corona estate. The children served as wedding party, Bryce and Mila as ring bearers, Karina as flower girl. Isabel's mother cried happy tears, Mrs. Patterson beamed with pride, and Randy Hendricks served as best man. The guest list was small but meaningful. People who'd supported Isabel through her darkest days, colleagues who'd stood by her when the media attacked, friends who'd never doubted her character. As they exchanged vows under an arch of white roses, Isabel thought about the journey that had brought her here. The devastating loss, the cruel betrayal, the moment when everything seemed hopeless. But also the discovery that love doesn't end when someone dies. It transforms, makes room for new love, new possibilities, new hope. I promise to love you, she said to Gage, to trust you with my heart and my children's future, and to build a life worthy of the man who brought us together. The children cheered when Gage kissed their mother, already calling him Dad Gage, and planning adventures in their new life. That evening, as the reception wound down, Isabel found herself in Tyson's study, looking at the family portrait that had first greeted her in this house. The painted faces smiled back at her, frozen in a moment of pure joy. Thank you, she whispered to her first husband's image, for loving us enough to plan for this, for trusting Gage to take care of us, for showing me that love multiplies instead of dividing. Gage appeared in the doorway. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. Isabel took his hand and led him toward the sounds of laughter from the garden, where their children were chasing fireflies in the gathering dusk. They'd survived betrayal, found justice, and discovered that sometimes the most beautiful chapters of life begin after the darkest storms. The Corona estate would always be Tyson's gift to his family, but it had become something more, a home where love conquered prejudice, where truth defeated lies, and where a grieving widow learned that her heart was strong enough to love again. What an incredible journey! Sometimes the cruelest betrayals lead us to the greatest victories, and love truly does find a way to heal even the deepest wounds. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If you found yourself rooting for Isabel and Gage, please share this video with someone who believes in love conquering all, and if this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.